Welcome to part 5 of my guide to the video game history. To begin with, let's quickly tell the history of Nintendo. The year is September the 23rd in 1889, and in Japan, in the eastern part of the Kyoto region, Fusajiro Yamauchi sets up a company called Nintendo Koppai to make Hanafuda playing cards. The company's name, Nintendo, translates to leave luck to heaven. Fast forward into 1949, and his grandson, Hiroshi Yamauchi, becomes the third president of Nintendo. An austere but brilliant man, exceedingly ruthless and stubborn, but being fiercely bright and ambitious. Wanting to expand the business, in 1956 he changes the company to just Nintendo, and through a deal with Disney to do Disney-themed playing cards becomes one of the biggest playing card manufacturers in Japan. Hiroshi looks to expand things further by trying everything from instant rice, taxi firms, and even love hotels, rooms that you can rent by the hour for the budding adulterer. But in 1969 he finally settles on making toys when a worker on his production line called Gunpei Yokoi comes to his attention making ingenious toys as a hobby in his spare time. The first toy Nintendo releases is the Extender Hand, and by the mid-70s they have become a well-known toy maker in Japan. In 1975 Nintendo start to enter the world of video games, with their first arcade game being EVR Race by Genyo Takeda, and then they have relative success with their own Home Pong variant and a follow-up arcade games such as Sheriff, Hellfire and Sky Skipper. The year is 1980 and Hiroshi decides it's time to enter America. Wanting to keep the company as a family-run business, he offers his son-in-law, Minoru Arakawa, the job of being president of Nintendo of America, or NOA for short. But with little capital and the games not to Americans' taste, NOA was struggling to keep afloat and desperately needed a game that would sell. So in 1980 a game arrives from Nintendo head office that Minoru is convinced will be a surefire hit they have been waiting for, and after a positive initial game testing by the local kids, he orders 3,000 cabinets to be made, tying up most of NOA's capital. That game is called Radar Scope, and it's a faux 3D Space Invaders clone. The trouble is, in the 4 months it takes to make the decision to make the cabinets and the cabinets arriving in America, a certain game called Pac-Man had been released. Suddenly Radar Scope looked out of date, with no one wanting another Space Invader clone, and Radar Scope just wasn't selling. Minoru needed a plan, or it would be the end of Nintendo of America. His plan was that Nintendo head office make him a new game, and then he would just need to change the ROM and the artwork, and so reuse all of Radar Scope's cabinets. Phoning his father-in-law with the plan, Yamauchi is furious, saying that he was wrong to trust his son-in-law and he was stupidly reckless and has nobody available to make the game. But understanding this could be the end of NOA, he begrudgingly offers an artist who designed some of the cabinet's artwork. He's never made a video game, but he's very imaginative and full of ideas. Minoru is inwardly furious at his father-in-law's seeming attempt to lampoon any chance NOA has of surviving. That untried game developer was called Shigeru Miyamoto, and he would turn out to be the greatest game designer of all time, creating Mario, Zelda, F-Zero, Mario Kart, Yoshi, to name but a few. But for this first game to help Nintendo of America survive, Shigeru wanted to have a story that the players would follow. So, in the game you played a hero who must rescue a damsel who was taken by a large gorilla. Hey, no one said this was Shakespeare. Aided by Gunpei Yokoi to help write the game, the finished product was a masterpiece, with 4 different screens and the first time a character would jump in the game. For the hero, Shigeru wanted an everyman, but designed him more out of necessity of design than choice. He gave him a red top and dark blue dungarees, so that his arms would be clearly defined when they moved. He gave him a moustache because it was difficult to draw a mouth with the limited hardware. And he gave the character a hat, so he didn't have to draw extra animations of the hair moving. The hero was born, and initially he was simply called Jumpman, as it was only later, when the game came to America, that Nintendo of America renamed him Mario instead, after their landlord, Mario Segali, agreed to give them more time to pay the rent. The game was made, and now Shigeru needed to give the game a name. Knowing that it was for America, he knew it must have an English name, but didn't speak a word of English. So armed with his translator, dictionary and thesaurus, he set about trying to translate stupid gorilla into English words that looked nice. For stupid he found the word donkey, and for gorilla he found the word Kong. Donkey Kong was born. You can almost see the scene in America, expectantly waiting for the new game that was going to save them. You start up the machine and see the words Donkey Kong. One Nintendo guy of America in the company, seeing the title, just swore and walked off saying that they were finished. But Donkey Kong went on to be a massive hit, taking the world by storm and turning Nintendo into a major video game producer, and spawning a whole range of licensing deals, and even its own cartoon. In 1982, MCA Universal would even attempt to sue Nintendo for copyright infringement for their film King Kong, even having the arcade cabinet wheeled out for the courtroom judge to see. Thankfully, it turned out Universal had let the film lapse out of copyright and the case was won by Nintendo. Donkey Kong would also spawn a multitude of sequels, with Donkey Kong Jr. in 1982, where Mario was recast the villain and Donkey Kong's son the hero. Donkey Kong 3 in 1983 was a total departure of the previous games, with Mario having left to his new job of being a plumber. Donkey Kong would be brought out of retirement years later in 1994 by Rare, with a series of platform games and races. And today Donkey Kong is still going strong on the DS. This was another great year in the arcades, with other hits being released such as Missile Command, which had you frantically stopping nukes all over your cities and perfectly captured the paranoid Cold War feeling of the time. And also there was a fantastically surreal blaster called Tempest, which had you frantically blasting monsters around a tube. It came about after a failed attempt by Atari to do a 3D Space Invader clone, and a dream that David Thurer had about monsters crawling out of a hole. Both games were designed by David Thurer for Atari, and both games are considered absolute all-time classics. Also, there was the fantastic arcade game called Frogger by Konami. This great game had you carry your frog safely to home. Other great games of the time was Kicks, an interesting game which had you draw boxes to survive, and Golf, a sort of Galaxian Space Invader clone that was made all the more interesting by the fact that the computer would talk to you and taunt you whilst you play the game. Other great games at the time was Scramble, one of the first real shoot-em-ups in the modern mould. Galaga, yet another Galaxian Space Invader clone, although this is my favourite variant of this type of game. And the wonderfully surreal Qbert that had you bouncing around a faux 3D pyramid. Well, I hope you enjoyed part 5. Please look out for part 6, where we look at the home consoles and computers of 1981 and 82. Until next time, see you later.